Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shield, desolators, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, pink slime. I'm a Useful Idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about Israel, the topic du jour. And they're the latest thing I hear. And so anyway, what I want to talk about is the fact that the evidence seems to be piling up that for many years now, Israel has been involved in directly and indirectly providing money, training, and arms to Al Qaeda. And we know they've been connected with all sorts of situations involving Al Qaeda over the years. And a lot of the connections have been tenuous at best. But a lot of things that are emerging now seem to be a little more concrete. And therefore, we can say it's safe to say that, ironically, Israel supports Al Qaeda and supports ISIS, two supposed terrorist groups. And of course, I don't need to necessarily explain the irony of the fact that all of these wars, all over the Middle East and North Africa, all of these wars on terror have been a war supposedly on Al Qaeda. And this is, like I say, stretching all across North Africa and the Middle East. And so now we have a couple of reports coming out and those interviews. And I did a separate interview on Sheikh Nabil Naim, who has come out and said that the ISIS and Al Qaeda get a lot of support from both CIA and Israel, and all the other bad actors we know about as well, including Saudi Arabia. And so it's kind of interesting that now we're getting a cross confirmation. That's one of the reasons why I ended up wanting to do this video. We're getting a cross confirmation of what Sheikh Nabil Naim said in his videos about the relationship with Israel and ISIS and Al Qaeda, specifically right now in Syria. Because now we get confirmation that Israel has a field hospital in the Golan Heights that is servicing jihadists from wounded jihadists from both ISIS and Al Qaeda. And this is confirmed in both the Jerusalem Post and by statements from Netanyahu. And there's even a photograph, which is in the article I'll attach below. It shows Netanyahu visiting these so-called terrorists and or mercenaries, because that's the other murky thing. We also know that there's a lot of bad actors and spooks in Syria from all these other nations operating proxies there. And that includes Israel Special Forces and U.S. Special Forces. I mean, it's a given. I mean, you don't have to see it in the news to know how these things work. And now we also get confirmation that Israeli media has acknowledged that there's a new Israeli missile system called Mitar that's deployed in the Golan Heights to support the rebels in Syria. And let's remember, there's basically only two rebel groups left in Syria. One is Al Qaeda associated Al-Nusra Front, and the other one is ISIS, this so-called Free Syrian Army, which is looking more and more like a fabrication over the years. It's nowhere to be seen, or at least certainly not on the battlefield. And we also know that this Israeli missile system employs middle and long-range missiles. So we could actually have Israeli strikes being done in Syria, and we wouldn't necessarily be seeing it in the news. And then on top of that, we also have a story that's come out about an Austrian military officer who recently was in the UN operation in the Golan Heights, and he said that Israel is providing large-scale logistical and military support to rebels throughout Syria, including having a joint operation room that coordinated those efforts. So that's fairly damning as well. So we have so far established that Israel has a missile system that they use to help Al Qaeda and ISIS in Syria. We see that they've provided money and training and arms over the years and apparently continue to do so. They provided a field hospital, and Sheikh Nabil Naim describes these same types of hospitals being used for ISIS wounded in Iraq as well. But of course, it's hard to confirm something like that. And add to that list, like I say, we now have a statement anonymously from an Austrian military officer about large-scale logistical and military support. So it seems like on every level, Israel is supporting ISIS and Al Qaeda. And you can't really say with any certainty what particular agenda. I mean, there's so many ways you could interpret the complexity of this. Who's using who? Who's useful idiot are they? And but it looks, for all intents and purposes, that Israel is supporting Al Qaeda and ISIS in every conceivable way. And this ties in with the video I did a while back called "Why Has Al Qaeda Never Attacked Israel?" And I've got a lot of people basically saying, "Oh, that Israel has been attacked by Al Qaeda," but of course that's not the point. That militants have done suicide bombings and the like. I'm talking about a large-scale, impressive Al Qaeda attack in the heart of Tel Aviv, the kind of supposed attack that we had in 9/11 in the United States. It makes sense that supposedly Al Qaeda, one of their goals would be to do an event like that against Israel, and have it. And I purposely left that video vague in hopes that people would ask themselves the question of why that hasn't happened, and open their minds a little bit to the possibilities. Because as we all know, the world of geopolitics is a very complex world full of lies and deception and layers of complexity, and this is a good example of that. Particularly, like I say, we have all these wars and all these actions in Iraq and Afghanistan and all over the Middle East and North Africa, supposedly to fight the war on terror and to protect the United States from terrorists, to protect Israel from terrorists, and yet we find the United States and Israel, two of the countries that are bankrolling, training, arming, and supporting these very same groups. And as I've also pointed out in a lot of videos, you don't necessarily have to control the throngs, the grunts, the foot soldiers of the so-called terrorist organizations. You merely need to have control of the leaders, and then you can have them give the illusion of independence and then perpetrate your own policies. And we could be seeing that here. And in the end, it's hard to tell, but the fact that even in spite of the fact that we may not know exactly what the conspiracy is here, we still have a situation where, once again, the United States and Israel are deciding who are the good terrorists and who are the bad terrorists. And it lends no credibility to the foreign policy or domestic policies of either the United States or Israel when you undermine the entire argument with trying to make some distinction, like I say, between good terrorists and bad terrorists. Of course, we know that history will tell us who the terrorists are, because the winners write history, and they turn their terrorists into heroes and revolutionaries and freedom fighters, and the losers become terrorists and militants and insurgents. And so it all goes back to Israel wanting to go after Iran. That's the prize. So whatever means, including working with Al Qaeda and ISIS to completely undermine Iraq and Syria and everybody else that gets in the way. So a very complex world indeed, and certainly everyone's hands are dirty, and this is a prime example of that. And it shows the outrageousness of this duplicity in light of all of the rhetoric coming from Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too? I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?